Harriet Nelson, known to the world as the ideal American mother on television, lived a life that was far from the perfect image she portrayed on screen. Her story began before she could even hold her head up. Born as Peggy Lou Snyder on July 18, 1909, in Des Moines, Iowa, she was just 6 weeks old when she appeared on stage for the first time. Her parents were performers in a traveling theater company, and they brought her into the spotlight as part of their act. It wasn't just for show, it was a real part of a real performance, and local newspapers even mentioned it. That early appearance made her one of the youngest known stage performers in American history. Harriet grew up under stage lights, surrounded by actors and audience members. By the time she was 3 years old, she was already speaking lines in performances. These were not simple roles either. She worked in fast-paced stock companies that performed different plays every night. Rehearsals were short, expectations were high, and everything moved quickly. Harriet had to memorize lines fast, adapt to new roles instantly, and perform with confidence among adults. Even at a very young age, people noticed that she wasn't just cute, she was talented. She proved she could handle real roles with real professionalism. Despite the demands of being on stage, Harriet still went to school. She attended St. Agnes Academy, a school known for its strict academic standards. Her life was carefully balanced between studying and performing. During the school year, she focused on academics. During vacations, she toured with her parents. It wasn't easy, but Harriet was incredibly disciplined. She was still just a kid, yet she managed to juggle two demanding worlds: education and theater. Her life took a major turn in 1925 when her parents separated. She was only 16 years old. The separation forced Harriet to make a difficult choice between staying with her mother or her father. It was a painful and life-changing moment that came right when she was on the edge of adulthood. Instead of being pulled down by it, she chose to stand on her own. She decided to pursue her dreams, moved forward independently, and never looked back. This experience made her grow up quickly. She was no longer just the daughter of performers. She was becoming a star in her own right. Just 3 months before graduating from high school, Harriet made another bold decision: she dropped out. She joined the ballet corps of the Capitol Theatre, a serious professional opportunity. Most people would have seen this as a reckless move, but Harriet saw it as a chance to get real-world experience. It wasn't easy to get into that ballet corps, but she succeeded. She traded her high school diploma for professional training, and that decision gave her the skills and exposure that shaped the rest of her career. Soon after, she found herself performing at the legendary Cotton Club in Harlem during the Roaring Twenties. The Cotton Club was famous for its music and wild atmosphere. Although it was located in a black neighborhood, it only allowed white guests inside. The performers, however, were mostly black and included musical legends like Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, and Louis Armstrong. Harriet danced and performed in this electrifying and risky environment night after night. The club was filled with gangsters like Lucky Luciano and Dutch Schultz, who ran the place from behind the scenes. It was both dazzling and dangerous, but Harriet never backed down. She learned not only about the glitz of show business but also about its darker side. It was during this time that Harriet picked up a habit that would follow her for the rest of her life. At just 13 years old, she started smoking cigarettes. In the entertainment world, smoking was seen as glamorous and sophisticated. For young performers, it helped them appear older and more worldly. But what seemed like a harmless habit became a lifelong addiction. Later in life, Harriet suffered from serious lung issues, chronic coughing, and breathing problems. Her smoking wasn't just a background detail, it was a slow and painful problem that stayed with her until the end. As other performers chased fame, Harriet focused on sharpening her skills in vaudeville. She worked as the straight woman in comedy acts with big names like Ken Murray and Burt Lahr. While she didn't get the loudest laughs, she played the essential role of setting up the jokes. Timing was everything in these acts, and Harriet was excellent at it. Lahr, who would later become famous for playing the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz, had a wild and energetic style. Harriet was the calm and steady presence that made his act work. They traveled constantly and performed several times a day, but Harriet never slowed down. Her talent and work ethic kept her career moving forward. One of the biggest milestones in her vaudeville career was performing at the Palace Theatre in New York. The Palace was considered the ultimate venue for vaudeville acts. Getting to perform there meant you had truly made it. Harriet didn't just appear there once, she performed there 4 times during the 1930s. Each performance earned her more respect and attention. Audiences came back, critics praised her, and casting agents began to take notice. These performances helped Harriet transition from being a vaudeville act to something much more. But just as her professional life was taking off, her personal life took a devastating turn. In 1930, at just 21 years old, Harriet married a comedian named Roy Sedley. He was 9 years older than her, smooth-talking, and deeply involved in the nightlife scene of New York. They had met at the Cotton Club, and at first, it seemed like a fairy tale. But the reality of the marriage was far from romantic. Sedley was violent and unstable. He drank heavily, partied constantly, and emotionally abused Harriet. She had grown up in show business, but nothing had prepared her for the pain and danger of that relationship. Harriet's world became filled with arguments, threats, and loneliness. Sedley's lifestyle wasn't glamorous, it was toxic. After a year, she left him, but legally she was still tied to him. It took 2 more years of struggle before she could officially end the marriage. In the meantime, she continued working to support herself. She returned to vaudeville, took on dancing gigs, and performed as a straight woman in comedy routines. She had to put on a happy face on stage while her personal life remained a painful mess behind the scenes. Finally, in 1933, the annulment was granted. Though the marriage was over legally, the emotional scars remained. During the difficult final stages of that marriage, something good finally entered her life. In 1932, while still legally married but emotionally detached from Sedley, Harriet met a saxophone player named Ozzie Nelson. He was calm, respectful, and kind, everything that Roy Sedley was not. Their connection was immediate. They clicked on and off stage. However, the relationship raised eyebrows because Harriet was still married in name. The gossip didn't stop them. Ozzie made her feel secure, and she wasn't about to let go of that. Ozzie gave Harriet a fresh start by hiring her as the vocalist for his band. She adopted a new stage name, Harriet Hilliard, to distance herself from her past. In most big bands of that era, female singers were often in the background, but Harriet stood out. She had charm, presence, and knew how to work a crowd. In no time, she became the band's center of attention. She sang, she joked with Ozzie, and she connected with the audience. People loved her. By 1933, Harriet's career was soaring again. She and Ozzie landed a job performing at the Glen Island Casino, a top venue that attracted wealthy crowds and broadcast their performances across the country. Harriet and Ozzie were a sensation. Their chemistry lit up the stage, and people took notice. They weren't just making music, they were building something special. Ozzie began writing special duet songs for Harriet. Instead of traditional love songs, these duets were full of clever jokes where Harriet often delivered the punchlines. One of their most famous numbers, And Then Some, featured Harriet teasing Ozzie on stage, and the audience loved it. She was funny, fearless, and incredibly engaging. In an era when women were expected to be quiet and sweet, Harriet stood out by being bold and witty. She didn't just play a part, she played it her way. Everything, the music, the laughter, the reinvention, the sold-out shows, was leading up to a new chapter. In 1935, Harriet married Ozzie Nelson. This time, the marriage was built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and real love. Together, they would go on to create one of the most iconic families in American television history. But behind the polished image was a woman who had lived 1,000 lives before ever stepping in front of a television camera. She had been a child star before she could walk, survived violent relationships, rebuilt herself from nothing, and navigated the roughest corners of show business with courage and skill. She poured cocktails for friends, shared jokes at private parties, and kept company with people society pushed aside. She smoked in secret, told off-color jokes, and never fit the mold of the woman she played on screen. Yet she showed up, day after day, to become the symbol of ideal motherhood on television. Harriet Nelson's real story is not one of perfection, it's one of strength, survival, and depth. Her past, filled with both darkness and brilliance, didn't ruin her, it made her. And that truth is far more powerful than any script she ever read. There were no secrets between them, just a simple and powerful connection. Two people who understood each other deeply, who wanted the same things out of life: a safe and loving home, a family, and a future built not on the pain of the past but on mutual trust. What Harriet found in her marriage wasn't just love, it was the kind of stability she had never experienced before. Her relationship with Ozzie was everything her previous relationship with Roy Sedley hadn't been. And that difference could be seen in every part of her life. Within a year of their marriage, she and Ozzie were already working together on radio shows, building something special not just as husband and wife, but as creative partners. By the late 1930s, their names were known in households across America. But their success didn't come overnight. It was earned slowly, with hard work, sacrifice, risks, and a number of second chances that shaped their journey. Harriet Nelson, who had been performing since she was 3 years old, had always been determined. In 1936, she signed a one-year contract with RKO Radio Pictures. At the time, she was just 27 years old, but she had already lived a full life on stage. She had just come off Broadway and the nightclub scene and was now stepping into a new chapter, one that would take her from live audiences to the silver screen. Signing with RKO wasn't a small achievement. RKO was one of the biggest film studios in Hollywood, known for producing major stars like Katharine Hepburn and Fred Astaire. Harriet's contract guaranteed her 3 films, with the possibility of more if she succeeded. It was a big moment for her, a bold step away from performing only with Ozzie's band. Both she and Ozzie had agreed it was her moment to shine on her own. That same year, Harriet landed a significant role in one of RKO's most eagerly awaited films, Follow the Fleet. This wasn't just any musical. It starred Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, 2 of the most famous actors of that time, and Harriet was cast as Connie Martin, the romantic lead opposite Randolph Scott. The film was released on Valentine's Day in 1936 and became a massive success, making over $3 million, which was an incredible amount of money at the time. Critics praised Harriet's acting, especially her chemistry with Randolph Scott, and audiences were charmed by her voice, her natural presence on screen, and her effortless charm. With music by Irving Berlin, including the classic song Let's Face the Music and Dance, the film solidified Harriet's place in Hollywood. She wasn't just seen as a singer anymore, she was now officially a movie star. As the 1940s began and World War II changed life in America, Harriet's career changed too. During wartime, Hollywood focused on making films that helped people escape reality, happy stories, comedies, and musicals that lifted people's spirits. Harriet fit that need perfectly. From 1941 to 1944, she starred in film after film designed to entertain and distract from the war. In Sweetheart of the Campus, she played a college student trying to save her school with a musical performance. In Confessions of Boston Blackie, she took on a suspenseful role, showing she wasn't limited to just singing or comedy. In Jukebox Jenny and Honeymoon Lodge, she took center stage, carrying entire films with her talent and presence. She was often juggling multiple projects at once, something that even many top stars didn't do. Directors admired her professionalism, and producers kept giving her lead roles because she always delivered. By the middle of the 1940s, she had acted in over a dozen films. In Coconut Grove, released in 1938, she starred with Fred MacMurray in a feel-good story about a band chasing fame in Los Angeles. Harriet played a tutor who joined the band and became the key to their success, thanks to her singing. Though the film wasn't a hit with critics, audiences loved it. In Jukebox Jenny, she brought energy and humor to a chaotic, music-filled comedy. In Honeymoon Lodge, she shared the screen with Ozzie in a rare romantic comedy where their real-life chemistry lit up the scenes. She also appeared in Swing Time Johnny and Hi, Good Looking, each film adding more range to her resume. She could do romance, comedy, drama, and music, and she did all of it often and well. Her name became known for representing happiness and hope during one of the darkest periods in American history. While audiences enjoyed her work, insiders in Hollywood began taking notice of her potential. She was more than just reliable, she had everything needed to become a superstar. She had beauty, talent, charisma, and a rare gift for making people feel something. She had worked with legends like Fred Astaire, Fred MacMurray, and Ginger Rogers, and she had held her own among them. Her reputation grew quickly, and many believed she was on the verge of becoming one of Hollywood's brightest stars. In Ozzie Nelson's 1954 autobiography, My Life with Harriet, he revealed something that very few people knew at the time. Both he and Harriet genuinely wanted her to continue acting in films. This wasn't a story of a woman being forced to give up her career. Harriet had the talent and the passion to keep going. She was rising. But together, as a couple, they decided that their family had to come first. It wasn't easy. It was painful, and it was rarely spoken about, but it was something they agreed on. That decision marked the beginning of a quiet but deep sacrifice. While Harriet stepped back from acting, Hollywood moved on. The very actresses she had once shared the screen with were becoming icons: Betty Grable, Rita Hayworth, and Judy Garland. Harriet watched from the sidelines, wondering what her life could have been. She later admitted that it was a bitter feeling to know that she had the talent and appeal to be among them. But instead of attending movie premieres, she was attending school meetings and raising children. That quiet ache never fully disappeared. In 1944, another major shift happened. When comedian Red Skelton was drafted into the military, Ozzie saw an opportunity to do something new. He created a radio show called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, based on their real family. The show debuted on October 8, 1944. At first, actors played the roles of their sons, David and Ricky, because the boys were still young. But eventually, the real boys joined the cast. The show became more than entertainment, it became a true family business. With big sponsors like Heinz and Listerine, the show aired 402 episodes and became a hit. Harriet now had a different kind of stage, one that entered homes all across the country. By 1952, the family made the move to television. ABC had already included an option in the contract for a TV version of the show, and they moved forward with it. What followed became television history. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet became the longest-running live-action family sitcom of its time, airing for 14 years, from 1952 to 1966. Audiences watched David and Ricky grow up on screen. They even watched them get married, with their real wives joining the cast. The show wasn't always number one in ratings, but it didn't need to be. Its strength was in its consistency, its warmth, and the way it gave the illusion of real family life. To make that illusion feel even more authentic, Ozzie went one step further. He had their actual house at 1822, Camino Palmero Street, recreated exactly on a soundstage. The real house's exterior was shown in the show's opening credits, and the studio set matched their real home's American-style decor down to the smallest detail. Harriet even helped design the set to make sure it felt just right. It worked. Viewers felt like they were sitting right there in the Nelson home. The show became a comforting weekly tradition for millions. At its peak, the show reached 20 million viewers each week. Harriet, once a promising film actress, had now become the face of the ideal American mother. She was calm, elegant, composed, everything America believed a mother should be. And millions of people thought that was who she truly was. But behind the scenes, Harriet's life was far more complicated. Her days started early. She would wake at 6 a.m., arrive at the studio by 7, and return home to meals prepared by a housekeeper. Still, she kept the image alive. Critics called the show a polished version of the American dream. Clean, happy, and free of pain, just what people needed after the war. Harriet became one of the three most iconic television mothers of the 1950s, along with Barbara Billingsley from Leave It to Beaver and Jane Wyatt from Father Knows Best. But unlike the others, Harriet wasn't playing a fictional character. She was playing herself. And that made the role both powerful and limiting. The real Harriet Nelson was much more than the polite, coffee-pouring mother on TV. Emmy-winning director Peter Jones once called her a bombshell, not just for her beauty but for her personality. She was bold, lively, and drawn to people who didn't fit into society's narrow expectations. In a time when TV completely ignored the LGBTQ+ community, Harriet privately supported them. She didn't broadcast it, but in her personal life, she was accepting and kind. That quiet act of inclusion revealed more about her than any line of scripted dialogue ever could. Harriet had a sharp sense of humor. She liked telling jokes that would never have made it on air in the 1950s. And she enjoyed cocktails, not just wine or tea, but real cocktails. She had grown up in the unpredictable world of vaudeville, surrounded by laughter, chaos, and unique personalities. That world shaped her long before she stepped into Hollywood. When she met Ozzie in 1932, she had already lived a full life on stage. They married in 1935, and while she became a wife and mother, she never completely let go of who she truly was. For the sake of the show, she played the role. But behind the scenes, she remained sharp, funny, and strong. Before all of that, Harriet had danced on Broadway and worked with famous performers like Burt Lahr and Ken Murray. She had even married comedian Roy Sedley in 1930, but the marriage ended in 1933. She knew how to make tough choices. When she joined Ozzie's band, she let her solo career take a backseat, not because she had to, but because it helped their act succeed. Still, she never disappeared. She simply stepped behind the curtain. She spent over a decade playing a version of herself that was polished for the camera. No one knew how deeply she could act, how easily she became the ideal mom while hiding so much of her true self. But everything changed in 1975 when Ozzie died from liver cancer. He was 69. Harriet didn't just lose her husband that day, she lost the rhythm of her entire life. The show had already ended years before, but Ozzie's presence had still been holding things together. After his death, Harriet pulled away from everything. She stopped attending events, refused interviews, and stayed home more and more. Biographer Michael Carroll said she never truly recovered. Even decades later, she remained in mourning. In the early 1990s, her son David was asked how she was doing. He answered honestly, saying she hadn't been in good spirits since his father's death, even after nearly 20 years had passed. Harriet had once been full of energy and laughter. But by then, she no longer hosted parties or smiled for the public. She rarely left her house and spent time only with a few close friends. The woman who once embodied cheerful motherhood on TV had become someone quiet and withdrawn. Then, tragedy struck again. On December 31, 1985, Harriet's youngest son, Ricky, died in a plane crash near DeKalb, Texas. He was only 45 years old. He had been a teen idol, a music star, and one of the most famous faces of his generation. Harriet was devastated. Losing Ozzie had broken her. Losing Ricky shattered her. The crash was sudden, shocking, and made headlines across the country. Harriet, already reclusive, retreated further into silence. She gave no public statements and never spoke about it in interviews. Her friends said she was simply broken. There was nothing left for her to say. But Harriet was also carrying a secret that had quietly destroyed her health. She had started smoking at the age of 13, and few people knew about it. It didn't fit the image of the perfect TV mom, so she kept it private. But the habit never stopped. Over the years, it damaged her lungs, leading to emphysema. She struggled to breathe, could barely walk, and still kept smoking in secret. By the 1990s, her illness had become too serious to hide. She spent her final years in the family's home in Laguna Beach. Once a place full of joy, music, and life, the house had become quiet and lonely. Visitors said Harriet barely spoke. She didn't smile. She didn't want guests. She lived in the silence of memories, surrounded by the ghosts of her past. Harriet Nelson died peacefully on October 2, 1994, at the age of 85. The cause was congestive heart failure, a condition common in the elderly that weakens the heart's ability to pump blood. She died in her sleep at her home, away from the spotlight, away from the world that once adored her. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There was no scandal, no tragedy. Just rest. Just sleep. What made her final moments even more meaningful was who was there with her, her son, David. He had been her co-star, her partner on screen, and her emotional anchor after Ozzie and Ricky had passed away. As Harriet took her last breath, David sat beside her, holding her hand. It was a quiet moment, but it spoke volumes. Their love was never just for the cameras. It had always been real. After her death, Harriet was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. It's the final resting place for many of Hollywood's greatest legends: Walt Disney, Lucille Ball, Betty Davis. But for Harriet, the most important names were closer to home. She was buried next to Ozzie and Ricky. Even in death, the Nelsons stayed together. Fans of classic TV visit their graves to this day, leaving flowers, saying thank you, and remembering a different kind of fame. A kind that was built on heart, warmth, and family. A kind that never really fades.